Africa's population is growing rapidly and expected to double by 2050 from currently 1.2 billion to more than 2.4 billion people. The continent therefore faces enormous challenges. Not only is the current infrastructure insufficient, the young generation is in need of decent jobs. Today, many young Africans face substandard and unbearable working conditions or unemployment. With no immediate action, the situation will aggravate itself. Industrial policies can help to promote sustainable economic transformation. Policies to support the introduction of new technologies makes people more productive within their existing jobs. Further, jobs can be shifted from less productive sectors to more advanced jobs. Though industrial policy is usually considered at national level, it is increasingly also part of the regional agenda. This is partly due to a frustration that regional integration has so far failed to boost intra-Africa trade and investment. To understand regional industrial policies, we need to shift our focus to the political landscape in affected countries. Cooperating regionally can theoretically provide benefits, but also increases the complexity. So what can we learn from existing regional industrial strategies?
The objectives which are stated are to do with, for example, in SADC, raising manufactured exports to 50% of their total. Now, the problem is that it's a question of whose exports, and in somewhere like SADC, you have huge countries like South Africa, which represent more than 60% of GDP. So there's a big question of winners and losers. The second finding is really about competition. So even though you can agree on a regional strategy, the fact is that even when these build on priority sectors, for example, that are selected by different countries, the fact is that each of those countries are trying themselves to promote those sectors and are themselves promoting their own national industrial policy to try and boost those sectors. So if we look, for example, in the EAC, what we find is that numerous of the priority sectors in the regional strategy are also the subject of export and import bans among countries. So that's to say, they agree to a regional strategy, but then at a national level, pressure comes to bear that they have to ban imports and exports within the region in that good. The third finding then is about the actual role, therefore, of a regional industrial policy. So even if the objectives look very much like a national industrial policy, the fact is that it needs to be much better applied to the reality on the ground. It needs to take into account the political realities within each of the member states and trying to find a way which can be something more of a complementarity to existing national strategies rather than a duplication. Now what that can mean then is the need to look much more at sort of missing regional public goods in a way. This is sort of the traditional regional integration model. It should be to do with overcoming coordination failures, so it's trying to see where actually information flows and complementary investments across border would help to stimulate investment and employment. And finally, it can be about connecting markets through the private sector, so actually working with firms and trying to see where these might actually manage to sort of learn from each other and connect to each other through market information. And that's some of the examples that we found, for example, in COMESA, try to do some of these different things.